And now we come to the final thread of the day, which I think is a really positive one to end on. This one is titled, "So is this my life now?" Everywhere I turn, I feel like shit for the decisions I make and the way I raise my child, especially on the minefield that is the internet. And he's only a baby. Is this just being a parent? Never-ending uncertainty and paralyzing fear that you're doing it wrong and probably permanently harming or at least hindering your child, even though you love them more than life? Ugh. I'm just trying my best. I hope I'm doing the right things. I'm full of love, but flawed. How do we live day to day with the knowledge that we're likely making mistakes that affect an impressionable whole other human? Second time parent, can you reassure your girl? I hope my boy is a forgiving person. And phew, in this moment, I'm thankful that I've always understood my parents were imperfect and told them so. They made mistakes, but can't begin to fathom the sacrifices they made. Creating life and then sustaining it is the greatest act of faith and bravery I can think of. The weight of it feels heavy today. Now, I think the title of this thread, "So is this my life now?" sounds so much more kind of derogatory and down than the actual content of the thread itself, where I would say that yes, actually, as a parent, you should have a certain amount of insecurity about what you're doing, because that's humility. That's what humility that's where humility comes from. If you are 100% convinced that what you're doing is right all the time, then you're most likely not going to be a good parent. I think having some amount of self-consciousness, of self-assessment, of self-reflection, and seeing what's working and what isn't, and questioning yourself about, hey, are you making really the best possible decisions for your baby, is healthy. Now, obviously, this is within reasonable amounts. And the internet kind of makes everything so much worse, because all of a sudden you think that everything is a much bigger deal. You're like, oh my God, if I do this, and my baby's going to never be the same ever again. We do underestimate quite how resilient babies are, quite how resilient bodies are as well. Like in terms of, if you ever drop your baby, a lot of people will be like, oh my God, I dropped my baby. Is my baby going to be okay? Obviously, I'm not advocating for dropping your babies. Don't drop your babies. But chances are that very often they will be fine. Chances are all of these little events that happen seem and feel a lot bigger and a lot more important to you as a mother, especially as a first-time mother, than they will be to your baby, who's going to grow to be a happy, healthy child. And so get rid of the paralyzing fear. You don't need to be completely paralyzed with fear about it, but it's okay to question, hey, am I making the best possible decisions for my child? And I really love this statement at the end: creating life and sustaining it is the greatest act of faith and bravery I can think of. I would agree with that to a large extent. I think that there is the act of faith comes from the belief that life has meaning, that life is valuable, that life is worth living, that the life that you can create for your kids and for their future kids is going to be equally as joyful as hopefully your life is. And yes, there's definitely a certain element of bravery in terms of belief in yourself and your ability to manage things as well. So I think this is an awesome thread. I think this is an awesome question. This is one of the reasons why going on forums like this can sometimes be a really encouraging and a really motivating experience. I will pull up some of the things that people say in response to it. The very first person says, if you feel like your anxiety is overwhelming you, you should definitely reach out to a doctor. Which, I mean, I did not read overwhelming anxiety from that comment, but maybe other people did. So I guess fair enough. If you really cannot function because you're so anxious, then yes, that's a problem. You shouldn't have to be worried or questioning yourself every second. I had major anxiety my whole life before baby, but for some unknown reason, it's mostly gone, at least when it comes to her. I just know that she's going to be fine. And that's awesome. Babies don't need us to be perfect, she says. And this is correct. Babies do not need us to be perfect. One comment that I found actually quite amusing. She says, I'm just a first-time mom, but between talking to my mom friends and then reading parenting books during pregnancy, it is very clear to me that no one has it figured out, and there is no right way for anything. I find a lot of comfort in that. I think there's actually also, just to comment on this a little bit, there's actually a lot of additional complication just the moment that you understand that babies are different, even when you have baby 1, baby 2, baby 3, they're all going to be extremely different from each other, and that you as an individual are also different from other mums, and even you at different stages in your life. So maybe you at the time that you have your first kid are a very different person, have very different needs from the time that you have your second kid. So all of the different methods that there are to parenting and all of the different ways there are of doing things, and whether you sleep or whether you sleep train or whether you co-sleep, whether you bed share or whether you do baby-led weaning or whether you feed purees, like all of these varieties that come up that there are kind of factions for on the internet, and some people do it this way and then argue against the others. There's probably room for all of them, and there's room for a million more. And there's a million other cultures out there where people do things even more differently. And so it's just understanding that, of course, there's never going to be a right way for everyone at every point in their life. Like, that's never going to be possible. So parenting is all about finding the things that work for you and for your kids. That's a good learning to take from this. But then she says, quote, "As a final note, I met a mother of 6 last year during my 3rd trimester. She said, 'I'm going to give you a piece of unsolicited advice. In motherhood, set your bar low. Any day that ends with your child or children alive, that's a great day, and you did amazing.'" Now that, I think, is completely over the top. You don't need to go quite that low. There's a lot that you can do to harm your kids that's, they can still be alive, but they're actually not doing that great. So maybe don't take that as a learning from this. And I don't think that this was intended, like she says. She said it because being a parent is hard. I mean, yes, but if your measure of success is my child is still alive at the end of the day, then that's not a very great success. So I just wanted to make that point because I agree with the general gist of this thread, and I think that most of the comments and the statements that people make here are great and things that you can take a lot from as a new parent. But you can set yourself a high bar and try and aim for that, and there's no shame in that either. Thanks so much for listening today, and see you next time.